Hello, Crafty Crandall fam. In today's video, I am doing a real-time paint with me. I have not sped any of this footage up with the exception of the drying because nobody wants to watch paint dry. So enjoy, sit back, relax, and I will talk a little bit about my process, but I also wanted to just do kind of like a random Q&A. So throughout this video, I am going to be answering some random questions, and I will leave timestamps down below in case you just want to hear the questions or however you want to navigate through the video. That's totally up to you. In total, this painting took me about half an hour. However, I did speed up the drying time, so that's why the video is only 24 minutes long. As you can see, there's quite a bit of drying time involved in this process. I did also leave in all of the paint mixing process as you see on the screen now, so just be aware. It might be a little bit boring to watch, but hopefully the questions keep you entertained. I did mix all of my colors first before putting just some plain water onto the paper for a wet on wet sunset technique. I like to get my colors ready in advance because I need to work quickly to get them on the paper before I continue. If I take the time to mix the colors while I'm letting the water dry, I ended up with it being too dry. So this is just a process that I've kind of honed over the course of many sunset paintings, as sunsets are perhaps my favorite thing to paint. This particular sunset is from a reference that I took whilst on an evening walk. I often go on evening walks and just really enjoy taking photographs and then painting them later of all of the really pretty sunsets that I encounter. Hopefully that's the only time that my head comes into the shot. I did not take that out, but I don't think it should happen very frequently, if at all, again in the video. I start by just laying out where the brightest portion of the sun will be and then layer around it to create more of the depth surrounding the sunset. But now let's answer our first random question. The first question that I've got from this random question generator is, what is your favorite thing to do when you're all alone? And to be honest, this varies. I think that primarily my answer would be doing artwork, or sometimes I like to read a book, other times I like to take a walk, and honestly, I think that it really depends on the mood that I'm in. During most of these activities, I will also have music playing, and to be honest, I spend a lot of time alone, so this question could really be most of my life, to be honest. As I finish up the yellow painting, I am just going to bring the blue down from the top to meet it. I've learned that if I try to just continue on with where I was, then I end up with really muddy colors in the middle. So instead, I just kind of bring them together without really mixing them because I want to avoid that at all costs. If you look at the sky, I mean, it does tend to be a little bit hazy in the midst where the blue meets the yellow. It kind of almost becomes like a white, such that you're not really seeing a green, at least in my opinion, when I look at the sky. So that's where I kind of want this to look similar. I want that haze in the middle, and then I want the blue to just get darker as it goes up. So I tried to bring some darker blue into the top so that I could kind of just fade down in a gradient. I do think that I could have taken this just a step further and brought it down just a little bit more, but alas, I did not. Overall, I think that this methodology works really well. I would encourage you to try it, see how you like it, see if it works for you. Personally, I think it works fine. I have, again, experimented quite a bit with it. I also find that this method of making the clouds works the best for me personally, though I do think that the clouds are still lacking for me. I still need to work on making clouds a lot better. So I just take a dry piece of paper towel and I kind of stamp out the general shapes of the clouds, and then later on I will go and add color to the clouds because they kind of reflect the light of the sky and they're really pretty in person. They just, don't necessarily come out quite as pretty in my illustration, but that is what we are here for. We are learning, we are getting better every day. Like I said, I did speed up the drying process because watching paint dry is super fun, as we all know. Uh, and then I am just going to go forward and start on the ground layers and then build up everything else after the fact. On to our next randomly generated question. The question is, what is the most amount of money that you've ever found, and what was the situation? This one was tricky to kind of think back and remember, but I do vaguely recall I was walking down the street of the city, kind of close to where I live, so I'm not going to say where. I was just walking down the street, there was a sidewalk, and I came across a $20 bill, and I picked it up, and then I kept walking, and then there was another $20 bill, like, down the block, and then there was another one close by to that as well. So I ended up finding like $60 over the course of, I don't know, a block or two. And it was really weird. And so I like looked around to see where like people were, if there was anyone ahead of me or behind me that might have dropped this money. And I literally couldn't find anyone. It was very strange. But I did just end up keeping the money because there was nobody there to kind of ask if they had dropped it or to give it back to. I don't know what the appropriate thing to do in that scenario is. So me being the, I don't know, probably college age kid that I was, who honestly needed the money because I was working 3 jobs on top of full-time school to pay for college. I did just keep the money and use it for whatever I was spending my money on at the time. But I was really grateful for it. And, could I have handled the situation better? Probably. But obviously chose not to at the time. I don't know how I would have handled that situation any differently now, though, I suppose. So there you have it. That's my answer to the question. I'd be curious to know what your answers to these questions are down below in the comments. I think that it's kind of fun just having really random, unexpected questions to answer. So let me know if you like this format as well. As far as the painting is concerned, I'm just trying to get the hill that is kind of center in the landscape just a little bit darker to kind of convey that it is like just in general darker with respect to like where the sun is, because the sun's not coming over that hill as much. It was darker, at least in my perspective and in the reference. Although, I mean, typically I would think that it would be darker closer to me, but based on just where the sun was, that was how it looked. I'm also just adding a bit more color and a little bit more like striation to the sky, because it was definitely hazier than just a flat wash, and so I kind of wanted to try to convey that here. It definitely was more concentrated toward the sun, and then as it dissipated away from the sun, the colors got far less vibrant and did kind of flatten out into more of what you see with the base layer. I personally love this painting method, and I think that it tends to work pretty well. I do think, again, I feel like I say this with every single painting that I paint, but I feel like I could have taken it a step further and maybe just added one more layer to try to deepen the colors more, but I didn't. I wanted this to be a really simple painting as well for this video, because I wanted you to be able to paint along with me if you wanted. I know I didn't mention that in the beginning, so if you haven't started yet, get on that. But I did. I wanted it to be capable of being a paint along as well, in case you are interested in doing so. The next randomly generated question is, what do you think is the most valuable resource? And I don't need to think very hard about this one. The answer is time. Time is your most valuable resource. You can't get it back. It is literally priceless. So how you choose to spend your time is extraordinarily important, and who you decide to spend your time with is extraordinarily important. And I think that we all could just stand to value our time just a little bit more. I tried to add some white to the orange for the clouds just to make it a little bit of a softer orange, and kind of tried to apply some of the opaqueness that the clouds themselves had. And while I think that this was probably a good idea in concept, I don't know that it necessarily came out looking the best. I think that I also probably messed up in that you'll see I end up drying the sheet after I apply this orange, and probably should have, while it was still wet, applied the next color so that they would kind of meld into each other a bit more. The clouds themselves did have this really gorgeous pinkish orange sheen to them, like I said, from the light of the sunset itself. It was very beautiful, and the tops of them were almost more like rain clouds in that they were really purple. So just trying to capture that with paint can be, at least for me and my current skill set, difficult. And I would love to hear any tips that you have for maybe making the clouds more vibrant or more realistic, as this is something that I do still struggle with, to be honest. This next question is super interesting. It is, what is something you commonly do today that you think people will wonder why anyone would ever do 50 years from now? There are probably so many answers to this question. Most immediately, I think my answer is probably going to be like text message or like call each other, something to do with technology. I feel like in the 30 years that I've been alive, I mean, when I was born, the internet wasn't too much of a thing. There wasn't really cell phones everywhere. Not everyone had a cell phone. It wasn't a super common thing. And so just in the last 30 years, there are so many things that we could never even have predicted would be such a booming thing. And so I feel like there's just so many things that are going to be like that 50 years from now that people are going to look back on and be like, what do you mean you couldn't, fly? What do you mean there weren't hoverboards? What do you mean 50 years from ago you didn't have whatever the new advancement in technology is? What do you mean you have to put gas in your car? What's gas, All of those things I think are gonna just, it'll be interesting to see. Hopefully I'll be alive in 50 years, so I'll get to kind of be that curmudgeonly old person who's like, back in my day, we had to go 6 miles uphill both ways by foot, and I can't wait to be that person, to be honest, because I feel like I really respect the elders in my life and the people who have those perspectives, and I really love hearing about the things that were prominent back in their day, like especially in the office. I love hearing from coworkers who have worked at my company for 30, 40 plus years, and they are talking about like intercompany memorandums and the fact that there weren't computers, there were just mainframes. There were typewriters at everyone's desk. They had to do plotting by hand. Like all the graphs that you can now generate through either Excel or Minitab or any of these high-end programs, Sigma plot, they just generate the plots for you. They had to do that by hand. All of that stuff just astounds me. So I'm sure that there'll be a million things 50 years from now that are going to astound someone else when I tell them, yeah, we always had to do it like this. So I look forward to that quite a bit. At this point in the painting, as you can see, my clouds don't look great. I definitely should have allowed the paint to mix together so that it was a lot softer of the edges, or I should have at least just blended out the gray once I put it on there. Alas, hindsight is 2020. But I also then tried to make the foreground a little bit more differed from the background. I realized that the colors weren't super different, and I also tried to just emphasize that way back in the distance there was lots of trees and things to look at. Then I decided to tackle the tree. Now, if you've been here for any length of time, you probably know that trees, also like hair, are one of those things that I always have trouble painting. And so I really, really, really tried to stick to my reference, and I used this brush that I got from the Arlie Bean Scrawler box, which I freaking love this brush. I cannot express to you how much I love it. And I think that it made all the difference in the world, to be honest. So I actually have a video for that. I will leave it linked up above if you're interested to see what else came in that box. But this brush has just been my favorite go-to brush ever since I got it. And I think that it, again, made all the difference in the world for making this tree, because I could do all the small details with this brush because it comes to such a fine point. and then I could make really straight lines. It was really great. I feel like when I use a round brush that comes to a fine tip, it ends up just getting in the way with the finer details when I have a lot of paint on the brush, or if I'm just trying to make super small details, it'll end up blending the color together, and then I just get a blob and it makes me really angry. So this did not do that, and I was super pleased with it. And to be honest, I think this is the best tree that I have ever painted. So you can tell me that it's not in the comments. That's totally fine. You're entitled to your opinion. But personally, I think that this tree came out definitely the best of any tree that I personally have ever painted. Now, is it the best tree on the planet? No, not even close. But for me, I think it's great. Oh man, I got really excited for the next randomly generated question because I read it too quickly. The question is, do you have a favorite brand? But I read it as, do you have a favorite band? And I do. But to answer the actual question, do I have a favorite brand? And I'm trying to think. I mean, I've got lots of favorite brands, like within categories, but like an overarching, one singular favorite brand. I mean, I've got my go-tos, but I can't really think of one in particular. I mean, I guess I would have to probably say Subaru, maybe, or like Apple. I don't know. It's hard to choose just one. I've definitely become more of an Apple person since getting my MacBook, which was hands down like the best purchase of this year. But my cars, I've had Subarus for my last 2 cars, and I've really loved them. They are fantastic cars, and they just keep running. I don't really have to put a lot of maintenance into them. I do definitely do my regular oil changes, tire rotations, and get maintenance when needed, but there hasn't really been anything huge. Knock on wood, that I've needed to do with either of my last 2 Subarus. So I would have to say Subaru probably is my favorite brand. Please let me know what your answer to that question is down below. I'd love to hear like what different categories that we all have our favorite brands in. It's funny, I'm doing a painting video and I didn't even say a paint brand. You would think that I would have, but even that, like, I don't know yet. I haven't had enough paint brands to really know. At least with cars, like I've driven a bunch of rental cars, so I have a decent idea of like what brands I would not buy. So yeah, there's my answer. Jumping right into the next question, since I am still working on this tree. The question is, what did you learn from the last book that you read? Which, the last book that I read, so if I don't count the read that I'm currently on, it was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. And I learned that Sarah J. Maas has a real way of writing characters that kind of infuriates me. She is really consistent, at least with the 2 series of hers that I've now read, in making characters that are frustrating. And what I mean by that is like, okay, so the 2 series that I've read are Throne of Glass, and I'm now halfway through the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. And I feel like both the main character of the Throne of Glass and the main character of the ACOTAR series are really similar in that they are supposed to be these like really strong female characters, but they let their love interest just destroy like who they are as a person, and they then have to have like this huge character arc of coming back into themselves. But it's like, okay, but you were a strong female character to begin with, so why do we need to go through all of these hoops and yo-yos to get back to you being a strong female character? Like, being a female in general, I just don't think that people go through the same character arc, and definitely not in the short periods of times that she portrays them in. So, I mean, I like the books overall, but that is definitely something that I learned, is that she's consistent in that. That is just how she writes strong female characters, apparently. So I don't know if I will continue to read them from her. I don't know if Crescent City has the same thing. I have not read really a synopsis for it. If you've read Crescent City, I would love to know if it's kind of the same story and whether I should avoid it for that reason or not. I finished up the final finishing touches of the tree, and then I decided that I needed to do something to make the foreground and the midground pop a little bit more. And so I then kind of just went back over them with one more layer of paint respectively so that they could both pop a little bit more, because the tree is meant to be the focal point of the painting, not necessarily the sky, although the sky is what I look at. The tree is supposed to be the focal point, so I wanted to make sure that like the foreground kind of brings your eyes up to the tree. So that was why I ended up just continuing to paint it. You can't see me mixing the colors here because they're all the way to the right, but I mixed another green for the midground and another green for the foreground, and I'm just going to go ahead and continue painting those. The next question is kind of funny. If you were to work at a circus, what job would you choose? And this is a tough one. So if I were flexible, I would want to be an acrobat. However, I'm assuming this question is asking like in your current state, and therefore I could never be an acrobat. So I think that I would either be the ringleader and just be like the one to hype the crowd and introduce everyone, or I would be like the stage manager who did all the props and the sets and everything and just made sure that everyone was getting to where they needed to be on time and just kind of manage all the people and the organization of the event, because I'm a super organized person and I think that I would do very well in that role, although I wouldn't be like, in part of the circus. So I don't know if that counts or not. It just said if you were to work at the circus, though. It doesn't say, I could be the person who sells popcorn, right? Like that's a valid role too. So I feel like that's a valid answer. I would be the production manager for the circus. And we'll do one more as we come to the end of this painting. The last question is, what do you think is the most complex aspect about yourself? And I think that this would definitely be, for me and probably most people, my mental health. So the anxiety that I feel, the way that my mood swings, just on a day-to-day basis or just an hour-to-hour basis even. I can be having a great day and then something happens, like something really stupid or small, and then that'll ruin my day. And it's a little bit ridiculous, and I don't like that aspect of myself at all. But I think that it is a complexity that a lot of humans have and need to acknowledge, and it's just a reality of, in a way, being human. So that's my answer. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do really appreciate it. Let me know if you liked this style of video. I never know if people like real time or not. And let me know if you liked the Q&A aspect, because I think that made it a lot more fun to listen to and watch, and I hope that you guys enjoyed getting to know me a little bit better. Thank you guys so much. I will catch you in the next one. Bye!